A reading from the book of Daniel, chapter 14, Bel and the Dragon. When King Astyages was taken to his ancestors, Cyrus the Persian succeeded him. Daniel was very close to the king, who respected him more than any of his other friends. The Babylonians had an idol called Bel, to which 12 bushels of the finest flour, 40 sheep, and 6 measures of wine were offered every day. The king venerated this idol and used to go and worship it every day. Daniel, however, worshipped his own God. The king asked Daniel, "Why do you not worship Bel?" He replied, "I do not worship idols made by human hands. I worship the living God who made heaven and earth and who is Lord over all living creatures." The king said, "Do you not believe then that Bel is a living God? Can you not see how much he eats and drinks every day?" Daniel laughed and said, "Your Majesty, do not be taken in. He is clay inside and bronze outside, and has never eaten or drunk anything." This made the king angry. He summoned his priests and said, "Tell me, who eats all this food, or die? But if you prove to me that Bel really eats it, I will have Daniel put to death for blaspheming him." Daniel said to the king, "Let it be as you say." There were 70 of these priests, to say nothing of their wives and children. The king went to the temple of Bel, taking Daniel with him. The priests of Bel said to him, "Look, we shall go out, and you, your Majesty, can lay out the meal and mix the wine and set it out. Then lock the door and seal it with your personal seal. If, when you return in the morning, you do not find that everything has been eaten by Bel, let us be put to death. Otherwise, let Daniel, who is telling lies." They were not worried, for they had made a secret entrance under the table by which they came in regularly and took the offerings away. When the priests had gone, and the king had set out the food for Bel, Daniel made his servants bring ashes and spread them all over the temple floor with no other witness than the king. They then left the building, shut the door, and sealing it with the king's seal, went away. That night, as usual, the priests came in with their wives and children. They ate and drank everything. The king was up very early next morning, and Daniel with him. The king said, "Daniel, are the seals intact?" He replied, "They are intact, your Majesty." Then, as soon as the king opened the door and took one look at the table, he cried out at the top of his voice, "You are great, O Bel. There is not the least deception in you." But Daniel laughed, and, restraining the king from going it any further, he said, "Look at the floor and take note whose footmarks these are." The king said, "I can see the footmarks of men, of women, and of children." Angrily, he ordered the priests to be arrested with their wives and children. They showed him the secret door through which they used to come and feast on what was on the table. The king had them put to death and handed Bel over to Daniel, who destroyed both the idol and its temple. There was a great dragon which the Babylonians worshipped too. The king said to Daniel, "You can't deny that this is a living God, so worship it." Daniel replied, "I will worship the Lord my God, for he is the living God. With your permission, your majesty, without using either sword or club, I shall kill this dragon." The king replied, "You have my permission." So Daniel took some pitch, some fat, and some hair, and boiled them up together, rolled the mixture into cakes, and put them in the dragon's mouth. The dragon swallowed them and burst. Daniel said, "Now look at what you have been worshipping." The Babylonians were furious when they heard about this and turned against the king, saying, "The king has become a Jew. He has destroyed Bel and killed the dragon and has slaughtered the priests." So they went to the king and said, "Hand Daniel over to us, or we shall kill you and your family." They pressed him so hard that the king found himself forced to hand Daniel over to them. They threw Daniel into the lion pit, and there he stayed for 6 days. In the pit were 7 lions, and every day they had been given 2 human bodies and 2 sheep. But for this period they were not given anything to make sure they would eat Daniel. Now the prophet Habakkuk was in Judea. He had made a stew and broken up bread into a basket, and was just setting off into the fields, taking this to the reapers, when the angel of the Lord spoke to him, saying, "Take the food you are carrying to Babylon, and give it to Daniel in the lion pit." Habakkuk replied, "Sir, I have never even seen Babylon, and I know nothing about this pit." The angel of the Lord took hold of the top of his head and carried him off by the hair to Babylon, where, by the power of his spirit, he set Habakkuk down right over the pit. Habakkuk cried out, "Daniel, Daniel, take the meal that God has sent you." And Daniel said, "You have kept me in mind, O God. You have not deserted those who love you." Rising to his feet, he ate the meal, while the angel of God carried Habakkuk back in a moment to his own place. On the 7th day, the king came to lament over Daniel. On reaching the pit, he looked inside, and there sat Daniel. Shouting out at the top of his voice, he said, "You are great, O Lord, God of Daniel, and there is no other besides you." Then he took Daniel out of the pit and threw into the pit those who had plotted Daniel's ruin, and they were instantly eaten before his eyes. The word of the Lord.